welcome to the next episode of DDR, the podcast all about your favorite Drow, Drizzt Do'Urden. My name is Justin, and in this episode, we'll be diving deep into part number 1 of Exile, titled The Hunter, discussing all of our favorite plot points, characters, and more.
Part number 1?
Part 1? Yeah, we're doing more than just one chapter.
That's right, we've changed the format.
Yeah. So sorry, real quick. Just for those that are listening, make sure you read chapters 1 through 6. Read the entire part before listening to this episode, unless you want spoilers. That's perfectly fine. But anyway, sorry, Jeffrey. Go ahead.
No. And as Justin just let you know, my name is Jeffrey. You know what, though? Even now, in the beginning of Season 2, we are still huge fans of Dungeons & Dragons. So you can bet your britches that we're going to take a look at this part 1 of this book, and see how it relates to our favorite tabletop role-playing game.
Following along with the show is easy. Just grab a copy of the book, read the next chapter. No, read the next part. It's right there. It says part, Jeffrey, but I still said chapter.
What? Why did you say chapter?
Because it's what we did last season.
Has it become so ingrained?
It is. It's so in there.
It's funny how you do something so repetitively that even when you put it down in the note and you're like, hey, big blinking letter, and you go right on through it, like just trucking through it.
Part.
Like, hi, my name is Justin. Wait, no, that's your line.
Yeah, so read the next part of the book and tune in every week. But remember, we want to hear your thoughts too. You can share your dim lights with us at drizztdoneright@gmail.com.
Or better yet, you can be a part of the ongoing discussion that's in our very own Drizzt Done Right Discord. The invitation for the Discord link is in the podcast description. So if you raise an interesting point, like we've told you before, we might just bring you up on the show and talk about it. Like right now, if you were to go in there, you'd see that I think we got a little book report going on I was talking to you about beforehand.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, Sevic is helping somebody out with a quote of where they can find the exact quote in a book that they're doing for a class. And it's just, hey, look, man, people helping people. We're going to have to bring that up and talk about it and give it
totally.
Awesome.
Clap. It's awesome.
Clap.
It's great.
This is a great way to keep in touch with us. It's a great way to get the latest updates about the show. If you're still interested in being part of the one-shot campaign, we're going to put this together. I just need a few more of you to come on in and be part of that fabric, because I need a couple of people. And right now we have a roster of a few, but we just got to add a couple to it. Just a couple more. Come on in. Get the Discord link. Click into that chapter. You'll find the board link there for the one shot. And it's just one of the things that for us, we want to get it off the ground and get it running. So Justin, it's been a little while, but how you been?
Yeah, so we did. We took a little bit of a break here, didn't we? I mean, a lot has happened since. One of the driving factors for needing to take a little break was for the fact that I was in the middle of my training at work. And since then, I have passed the final. I got a 98%. So I'm happy with that. Missed one question. So, I mean, that's my life so far. I mean, since then, I've just been studying past that. And then once I passed that, Baldur's Gate, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Baldur's Gate. I was so on the fence about getting it. And then, I mean, a few people talked about it in our Discord. I listened to another podcast about video games, and
excellent.
I mean, I'm hooked. Jeffrey, it's bad. And what's worse is my wife Sarah is also in on it. We bought her a Steam Deck just so she could play there. So we're not fighting over the computer, right?
Right.
We had to buy another copy of the game. And I mean, not that we were ever fighting about the game, but it was just kind of oh, you want to play? All right, go ahead. But I want it soon.
Hey, I did leave my guy in a tavern. Okay. He can't continuously drink. We've got to move on from there.
But yeah, now every once in a while we're playing together. It plays so much like D&D, just in a computer game, and I'm playing through the campaign by myself, but I'm also playing through a separate campaign with my wife, and there's a lot of replay value there. Just the amount of creativity you can have in it and everything. It's really cool. It's
nice.
Really cool.
Nice. I knew they were doing a new Fable, so it's I don't have an Xbox.
Man.
So I think, that sounds kind of cool. But then it seems like Baldur's Gate is the, I guess, the alternative to that if you want to have a RPG style game right now.
Yeah, I'm excited for Fable as well, but I feel like that one's not coming out for a while yet. But
Nice.
yeah, I mean, and then soon Starfield is coming out, the new Bethesda game, and I'm just like, oh, I won't be able to get that just because I'm playing Baldur's Gate so much.
Meanwhile, I'm stuck back here on like Dead by Daylight, running around trying to kick off those generators. You ever played that game?
No, I haven't.
Oh man, it's such a simple game, but it's fun. You run around and you're being chased by a bad guy. So one guy plays the bad guy, and then you have 5 people who are the innocents, right? And you all run around. You have to try to fix 6 generators, which open up a gate. And then you have to go open the gate, and everyone has to escape, or the killer gets you and hangs you on a hook.
Oh man.
Yeah. So there's all different kinds of killer, like Friday the 13th, Halloween, Saw. Like they use different themes.
Ah, cool.
And it's just it's a pretty mindless game. Like they do the skill checks where it's like you hear bong, and it'll have a little like a speed dial, and there'll be a small section that you've got to stop the spinning needle in.
Right.
Otherwise, you fail the check, and it sets off an alarm that the killer can see, and they come after you.
Oh man. That sounds terrifying. Though.
It is, but it's also like I don't have to put an hour or 2 into it. You know what I mean? I can just be like, cool, pop on, jump on here and run around like an idiot.
Yeah.
A little fun.
Yeah. No, that is fun. No, Baldur's Gate is not one of those games that you just pick up and... I mean, you pick it up and 2 hours goes by in like 5 minutes. Yeah. It's just like, where did the time go?
Shout out to my wife, Elizabeth. She one time bought me Skyrim, and she was like, I thought you would spend a lot more time playing Skyrim. I was like, well, see, that's the problem is you either spend all your time playing the game.
Yeah.
Or very, very small bits. Because it's like, I did not get the same amount of use out of it she thought I was going to. And I was like, because I couldn't sit down for like 6-hour blocks.
Right.
And go
that's
hunt
what it takes.
Deer in a forest.
That's what it takes, Yeah. It's crazy.
A lot of it is just roaming and wandering, and it's gorgeous. You know what I mean? Like, and I love those kind of games. So I look forward to those.
Yeah, totally.
So, what do you think that we kick this season off, knock this part down, hit an insight check, and get this baby rolling? So, for the insight check, the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? Our first insight check starts right where the book 1 left off. Drizzt is recalling the day that he walked away from the city of his birth, with all of the Underdark laying before him and the determination to live by his morals. With Guinevere by his side and the scimitars belted to his hips, the future was his own to determine. Then we're hit with an interesting time jump. One of the more intriguing things about races that are long-lived is how they measure the scope and scale of their life. For Drizzt, he ponders how you measure centuries when a single hour seems like a whole day.
Right.
And a single day seems a whole year. So it's kind of inverted from where you normally see it, where they think that, the passing time, he's looking at it that the time is slowed down so much for him.
Yeah.
When the moments aren't shared with anybody else. The solitude that exists beyond the cities of the Underdark was more precious than the resources necessary to survive. Inside of the quiet is where the hunter trained himself in survival, gaining the physical skills and experience necessary to live on. Solitude, however, was also his enemy, the indeterminable, incessant silence of hushed corridors. Inside this solitude, actions boiled down to survival. Drizzt became a creature of instinct, calculating, and cunning, but not thinking. Not using his mind for anything more than directing the newest kill.
Mm-hmm.
Guinevere saved him from existence as surely as she had saved his life from the cave fissure all those years ago, providing Drizzt with reasons to look forward to the next day, the next time that he could call her forth and they could prowl the tunnels together. Could the pain of tooth or talon be greater than the emptiness and the silence? Drizzt doesn't believe so.
Yeah, it's really interesting how he has developed this split personality, almost like a Smeagol versus Gollum personality.
Yeah, and that's a great look at it, because in the same instance, Smeagol and Gollum were buried from the sunlight. You know what I mean?
Right.
They spent so long away from anyone that it created that rift and that rupture between personalities, kind of.
Yeah. Now these personalities are distinctively different from Gollum and Smeagol, but the one is the survivor, the one that is kill everything that needs to be killed so that we can eat it. or so that
That's
it doesn't
Gollum.
kill me. And
Yep.
that's right. That's more like Gollum.
Well, that's the role Gollum filled in that.
Right. Of course. Yeah, totally. So it's really interesting. So, all right. Awesome insight check. The next portion of the show is the Drizzt. The Drizzt. It's the part of the show where we take a look at the next part of the book. I almost butchered that too. And we give you the Drizzt of it. Man, it's just like so ingrained in my head. So,
don't let the words fool you.
I just have to read. That's all I have to do. So yeah, this Drizzt that we're about to do here, it's going to be a little more of a summary than before. We're not going to be able to go in as much detail as we were able to in the past book, just because we are covering 6 chapters here. So
our goal is to be slightly more concise.
Right. That's the goal. That's the goal. So chapter 1 here starts off in House Do'Urden, 10 years after Homeland ended. Salvatore does provide a little bit of a recap from the end of the last book, where Zack is sacrificed in Drizd's stead. Drizzt then denounces Lolth even harder and then runs off into the Underdark. So we now have hired mercenaries being used to fight between the Do'Urdens and the Hunnets. The mercenaries of the name Bregan D'Earth, who is, this is where we first meet Jarlaxle, who,
Yes.
I mean, yeah, like a number of people in our Discord already had conversations about their favorite drow, whether it's Drizzt or Jarlaxle. And for a lot of people, Jarlaxle's up there, if not number 1,
Well, I think everybody loves to cheer for a hero, right? But then you have people who they really love an anti-hero, or they want somebody else in the lore and the mantra or whatever, the wording, the lore, to really kind of fall in love with. You know what I mean? Like everybody loves Harry Potter. But you know what? There's some Snape fans, and there's some, some Draco fans. Everybody's got their own little niche. And I think Jarlaxle, for a lot of people, represents like that counter Drow culture. Like you have the mindless robots that you saw in book 1. Then you had Drizzt. He was so just dynamically different. And then in here, you have Jarlaxle.
Jarlaxle takes it to a whole nother level. This guy comes in and he's just so like, he has a shaved head, but then he has this magnificent hat.
Oh yeah,
and
which
just
has like a huge feather on it from a bird in the Underdark.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he's got all these like trinkets and baubles on his clothing, which he's got like a high cut vest to show off his abs. Like
that's right. I forgot about that.
Doesn't make a noise. Silent.
Right.
It only makes noise when he wants it to.
When he wants it to, which is so cool.
Bro, it's such a level of fashion. That you didn't even know totally. Drow had fashion, and then in walks Jarlaxle.
Here he is.
Oh, wow.
So Jarlaxle returns to Matron Malice from, he was sent to kill Dupree Hunnet. Malice claims that Dupree was, which I assume is a female, but Malice claims that Dupree was the first noble victim of the war. To which Breeza has some snarky remarks to that, right?
Shock.
Their conversation is cut short when House Hunnet attacks House Do'Urden. House Do'Urden is outnumbered, but the Do'Urdens are better trained. Matron Malice commands Jarlaxle to help her win the war, to which he brings out a whistle, blows on it. You can't hear it, but all of a sudden, 100 or so Hunnet soldiers turn and start fighting for House Do'Urden.
Man, this scene was really cool because like they walked out on the balcony, and Deanan is like, "Oh wow, we're over." He even has the thing right away, like fights off a dude from the balcony.
Right.
Jarlaxle is so calm. He's just like,
he keeps his
good job.
Right.
He's like, whoa. It's like he's just blows a whistle. I guess it's trained only for the ears of Bregan D'Earth. So like. Well, because it says that, and it's like that's why all of a sudden they just stop, pivot, and turn. It's like Bregan D'Earth only looks out for Bregan D'Earth. I was like, oh, that is cold-blooded, man. I like that.
So the Do'Urdens end up winning the encounter. So then the next day or so, Matron Malice was summoned to the ruling council, which, she's excited for. This is before House Hannett is actually, like, eradicated.
Right.
They're not judged or anything.
But she knows they're caught.
Right. And so she knows that she's eventually going to be on the ruling council. She was the ninth house of Menzoberranzan, soon to be the 8th, right? Mm-hmm. So she is destined to be on the council. But Matron Malice was very confused when she showed up. And who else is at the ruling council? Matron Sinafe Hannett.
Wait, what? Because she's disgraced.
Right, like, she's supposed to be cowering in her house right now, but here she is
awaiting Drow justice.
Yeah, exactly. But here she is at the ruling council. Malice almost kills her on the spot, but then Sinafe discloses that she was also summoned by Matron Banray. So Malice better not, because she doesn't want to interfere with any schemes that the first matron of Menzoberranzan is working on here, right? So turns out Lolth demanded that House Hannett attack House Do'Urden, basically just to end this decade-long feud, while allowing Sinafe an escape from an immediate death by having her join House Do'Urden as the oldest Do'Urden daughter. Shanaina is the way that it's pronounced in my audiobook. Shanaina. So anyway, they just claim that Shanaina was living at some other city, other Drow city, and then, she returned. So apparently Lolth...
I like how Drow live on forever, right? Where they have this hierarchy.
Oh, yeah.
Of houses and ruling council, and they're like your oldest daughter just came in from...
Right? Like, no one's gonna know that that's not the oldest daughter, right?
Nope. Like, Breeza had a sibling? What?
It's like, but I remember when Breeza was born, and it was this big thing because it was Malice's firstborn daughter.
Right? They even had the cake in the corner for Donna from HR. She got the cake with the candles that keep relighting. Right. Said firstborn burn.
Right. So apparently Lolth has wanted Malice on the ruling council for years, but in her house's current state, the Do'Urdens were just too weak to hold that position for long. So then they're just like, hey, just like put Matron Sinafe in there. So Banray realized this and orchestrated this whole attack, possibly even down to the mercenaries even switching sides. Like, at least that thought crosses Malice's head at one point. Yeah. She doesn't confirm it, but it's like, well, yeah, that would make a lot of sense. Banray then commands Malice to deal with her rogue son before Lolth makes them all regret these events. And then at the end of Chapter 1, before it actually ends, Malice holds a family meeting and gives Dinan and Breeza orders to go out into the Underdark and find Drizzt and haul him on home just so he can be sacrificed. So that's Chapter 1. We then go into Chapter 2.
How they were expecting this giant meeting and she just shows up like, go get Drizzt.
I mean, there's a lot more small talk to it, but that's the basis of it, right?
Yeah, they're like, what are we going to be having for dinner? Go get Drizzt.
So in Chapter 2, we get back to Drizzt. Drizzt is hurting after the Basilisk fight in the prologue, which I totally forgot to add into the Drizzt here, but that's okay because Jeffrey's going to be talking about it later.
It might be my dim light.
So, he's both physically hurt as well as, I guess, sort of emotionally, as he now has to go around and patrol, basically recapture the Rothe that are his pets, I guess his like source of food.
Well, they're kind of like cattle, like smaller, like they're his source of food. I guess I don't know, pet I think of as like, you throw the ball, play fetch with it. But you're right, they're his animals.
They're his animals. But now he has to go around and collect them. He also has to kind of like assess all the damage that's been done by this like gruesome creature that he ended up killing in the prologue. Again, Jeffrey's going to get to that. So now he's living in the Underdark near a grove where Myconid, which are like mushroom people, where they live, right? Drizzt spent his day hunting down his Rothe that were scared away by the Basilisk. And while out looking for them, he stumbled upon a group of deep gnomes, the Svirfnebli, or however they're called. I don't actually have it written here, so that's completely from from memory there. But these deep gnomes were mining for gems, and he was entranced by their voices. He couldn't help but spy on them, and he was just entranced. He was entranced by their voices because he hasn't heard a voice with his ears for how long, right? Other than his own. Even though he wasn't able to understand them, he was just so entranced by them. And when the gnomes were packing up to leave, Drizzt could not help but follow them. He didn't want to be left alone in silence again. He followed them straight to the deep gnome city of Blingdenstone. He wanted so much to run into the city and allow the deep gnomes to take him in, but the hunter side of him took over and would not allow Drizzt to throw his life away. So he ended up returning back to his grove.
I thought that was so cool in that moment because it really spoke to the fact that like it took him back to when he first met the other gnomes, and he was just so entranced, not just at the language, but of the memory of the like that first contact he had with a race other than his own. That was, even though they were not vicious, they were very, they were upfront about the fact that he's probably going to die. They're probably going to kill him.
Yeah.
But you know what? They'll show you mercy and make it quick. And it's like, to him, it was like, oh, those are my friends, right? I mean, they could have been my friends because they treated me different than those other Drow. And it's almost like somehow his mind has changed that to such a happy memory that he feels he could just walk on into Blingdenstone and they'd be like, oh, Drizzt.
Well,
treat him on an individual basis.
Right. Well, I don't think he's dismissing the fact that they would most likely kill him if he walked in there, but there's that little sliver of hope where it's just like, but maybe, like maybe they would be welcoming me like that.
That's what I mean. It's like it feels like he took that thread of hope that he had back with Belwar, and then he's like, "Well, actually, that's not the smallest rope. That might work." Like, oh, Drizzt, you're not like. It's like then like the hunter side's like, "Stop, shut it down. Do not drunk dial.
Right,
stop it."
Right. All right, and then into chapter 3, Dinan and Briza were hunting their brother throughout the tunnels of the Underdark. Drizzt and Gwenevere both sensed the Drow patrol coming into the area. Drizzt was actually amazed that he could hear them so easily. Like, either his ears were so well trained now after being in silence for so long, or the patrol just got sloppy or something. I don't know. But turns out Briza was using magic to track Drizzt, and she just found him. Drizzt sent Gwen to go see who they were. And when Gwen came back, she pointed at Drizzt's house emblem, and Drizzt knew it was his family. So, of course, he hasn't seen his family in 10 years. What do? Drizzt tried. Yeah, he made a break for it. But he found that the patrol was able to keep up, just barely, right? Like, he got away pretty far. He was huffing and puffing, but then realized, like, oh no, they're still coming. So he knew he was being magically tracked. So Drizzt gave
at some point, I think it literally says he thinks they might actually be getting closer. Not that they were keeping up with him, but like as he kept hopping, like eventually he realized like they were starting to gain ground.
Right. So he ended up giving his house emblem. He deduced that the house emblem was the magical item that they were tracking, right? So he gave that to Gwenevere and just had Gwenevere just book it, just take off. And yeah, it worked. Like the soldiers were just chasing after her. Eventually they got to a fork in the road. They had to choose one way. They ended up choosing both ways and just sending half of the force on either side, while Dinan and Briza stayed behind. The patrol chased after the cat. Drizzt hid and waited in the shadows above, and when Drizzt was confident enough that the soldiers were far enough away, he dropped down and just slammed his sword hilt on Dinan's head. Briza responded to Drizzt with her snake whip. But before she attacked, she attempted to deceive Drizzt into returning home, basically saying like, hey, the war's done, come on home. But Drizzt recognized this deception and launched an attack. Dinan eventually came to and ran away. That's pretty much what happened there.
If nothing else, that moment really reinforces the males in Drow society. When Breeze is always like, "You pathetic male," like Dinan is also in this group, but in a split second was knocked out, and then when he's conscious, it's gone. Like, forget
he's just like, he fought a little bit, but he's just like, "Nope, drop my sword, I'm out, I'm out," and just like runs off. And then while fighting Breeza, Drizzt got her into a position where he could quickly end her life, but it was interrupted when Guenhwyvar tackled Drizzt to the ground. Of course, then Breeza chased after Dinan, not trying to get Dinan to turn around, but just like, he ran away, I'm running away too. Just like they were running from him. And I was a little confused by this scene here, because I'm just like, hold on, why did Guenhwyvar stop it? But then I remembered, just a few sentences later, Guenhwyvar was making sure that Drizzt did not break his oath from Book 1, where he swore to never kill another Drow. And Drizzt and the Panther fled the scene together because the soldiers ended up showing up, but the soldiers didn't actually chase them down, since Dinan and Breeza weren't chasing them down either. Later on, Drizzt and Gwen were having some relationship issues. Guenhwyvar basically walked to her figurine and then returned to her realm without Drizzt telling her to, without ordering her to, right? Just like a teenager running to her room and slamming the door behind them. And this just left Drizzt infuriated.
Yeah.
Then we go into chapter 4. Drizzt was slowly going mad in his solitude. He was afraid to summon the cat in fear that he lost his only friend. Eventually, Drizzt summoned Gwen. Thankfully, she seemed to hold no grudges. And again, Drizzt heard the deep gnomes mining again. Okay? And he was torn. I mean, it was torment for him to watch and listen to them, yet to not be able to go interact with those deep gnomes. Having to be alone, it was even worse. So he was just stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? And so he couldn't help it.
If you think about it now, you have 97 different streaming channels, right? But if you lived out in the middle of nowhere with no running electricity, no running water, none of that, right? Middle of nowhere, and neighbors not around you, and then suddenly there was a jazz band playing down the street. You could almost see them. But you could hear them. And suddenly, like, you know what I mean? You're just like, what is it? You're just overburdened with that curiosity. You got to go. You got to go.
Right.
Look.
Got to go check it out.
What is that? That doesn't happen every day.
So he couldn't help it. Drizzt overcame the hunter inside him and watched the gnomes for several days. When they packed up to leave, again, Drizzt followed them to the gates of their city. Drizzt brought Guenhwyvar out one more time just to say goodbye in case the worst would happen. Then Drizzt walked toward Blingdenstone's city gates, and the guards quickly came out and imprisoned him. On to chapter 5, Matron Malice summoned the family to the anteroom to yell at Breeza and Dinan for their failure. She offered Dinan another chance to redeem himself, but Dinan was like, "Nope, Drizzt is too powerful. No, there's no way that I would be able to actually bring him back. I would not be able to get back in your favor. I can't best him."
He had a massage moment where it's like, nah, kill me. Nope.
Right.
Forget it.
So the house continued to scheme, trying to figure out the best way to take out their rogue son that so easily bested 7 Drow, where one of them was even a priestess of Lolth. And he just, took care of them all.
He cut the heads off Breeze's snake whip.
Right?
Like, I mean,
that's crazy. A detail that I left out. But yeah, that's something he did in that battle. Now pan camera left toward the great chapel in the Do'Urden compound, and Matron Malice was about to unveil her next idea for killing Drizzt. But no one else knew what to expect. Malice...
she got one of these like Bond villain schemes. Like, all right, the buzzsaw down the table while he's chained to it. I got it.
Like, I didn't see this coming either, and for that, it made my dim light real. We'll talk about that later. Malice called a handmaiden of Lolth, a Yochlal, while Dinan started leading the crowd in a chant. And in a deceptive plan, Malice acts like she's going to sacrifice a drugged-up Risen, but instead plunges the ceremonial dagger into Shanaina, that is, Matron Sinafe of House Hanet. The Yochlal was pleased by the act. Zaknafane is then... Yeah, Zaknafane! Zaknafane, who died in the last book, is then reanimated by Lolth's power as some super drow zombie that is
like
going
Weekend
to...
at Zaknafane's.
What's that?
It's like the movie Weekend at Bernie's. It's like
Right.
Weekend at Zaknafane's.
Nice, yeah. So now they expect this Zaknafane zombie wraith, whatever you want to call it, to go off and collect Drizzt.
That won't be creepy at all.
Right?
Nope.
Right? Moving on to chapter 6, we're in Blingdenstone. So after being imprisoned by the Deep Gnomes, Drizzt was led through the city of Blingdenstone. It was a maze of stone that would be nearly impossible, if not impossible, for an invading army to penetrate it. They dragged Drizzt all the way to his cell, chained him to a chair, and then left. And then sometime later, we had a number of elder gnomes come in to interrogate Drizzt. They quickly figured out that Drizzt came from Menzoberranzan. Obviously, they immediately thought he was a spy, because why else would a drow so willingly just, walk into their hands, right? Drizzt tried to explain it to them, but the language barrier was just too high. They didn't understand drow language, whatever language that is, enough. Undercommon would be normal in 5e, but Deep Gnomes would also speak Undercommon, so anyway. Drizzt was then reminded... That is a
weird fact that they're not able to communicate, because in goodness gracious, in D&D, everybody speaks Common. There's not like a group of gnomes you run into that don't speak Common.
Well, these are Deep Gnomes, so they would, in 5e, they would speak Undercommon, it's called.
Oh.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Drow speak the same, but... maybe back
so
then,
it'd be like
they had their individual
English when he speaks to him,
I guess, yeah.
Undercommon.
Right. So yeah, the language barrier, either way, they didn't speak the same language, and except the one elder did speak a little bit of Drow language, was able to speak with Drizzt a little bit at least. But it was just too high of a language barrier for Drizzt to get his point across. Drizzt was then reminded of the deep gnome that Drizzt saved so many years ago, Belwar Disengulp. Of course, the gnome lost both of his hands before being released by the Drow, so maybe that's not the best name to bring up right now. But perhaps the gnome would also remember how Drizzt fought for that gnome's life. And so that's kind of where we leave Drizzt at this point. And then back at House Do'Urden, we have everyone marveling over the zombie drow Zaknafane. And then Malice orders Risen to take out his sword to test this wraith, to which Risen attempts to, for some reason. Is he under a spell or something? Because he takes out his sword and
have you ever thought that one day you could beat up like an MMA fighter? You know what I mean?
No.
You're like, on a good day, I'd give him a good 1-2. Yeah, I feel like Risen was always kind of looking at Zach like, yeah, he's better than me, but
I gotcha.
How much better than me? And then now he's like, this is
a
dead
zombie.
Zach. Yeah, I'll go ahead and test him out. Have at thee.
And Zaknafane, the zombie drow Zaknafane, just destroys Risen. Risen's sword goes flying, and before Risen even notices it, he gets a slash across the throat and a stab in the chest. He falls to the floor. He dies before he hits the floor. And then this zombie just tears at Risen with his swords like a madman until, he doesn't stop until Malice says so. And then basically Malice just sends Zaknafane out into the Underdark to go bring back or kill Drizzt. Wow. That was a lot.
Yeah.
6 chapters worth of the Drizzt. And, yeah, let's go ahead and talk about our favorite parts in the dim light reel.
All right, the dim light reel is where we cast darkness on our favorite parts from this week and dim light all of our favorite characters, events, descriptions, and more. For me, it was the basilisk fight. Sure, you could call it the prelude. You could call it the first part. It was the basilisk fight.
But I mean, like, I didn't talk about that in the Drizzt, so did it actually happen?
If a basilisk fights a hunter in the Underdark and there's no one there to hear it, does it make noise?
Nice.
So, the hunter watched the basilisk pass as he had earlier that same day. I love the way that line hits. They already described it as having 8 legs that would occasionally scuff stone. It never had to hurry from a predator because in the dangers of the Underdark, this creature knew only security.
It didn't have any predators.
Yeah, right? I mean,
So
wow.
cool.
Way to kick off the book. Book 1 led us to the overwhelming conclusion that there are horrors in the Underdark. And Book 2 starts us off with meeting a creature that knows no fear of the Underdark. And Drizzt is just standing there watching it pass as, normal. It's a Tuesday.
Yep.
Its breath reeks of deadly poison. It has rows of spear-like teeth. And the gaze of a basilisk could transmutate into solid stone any living thing it fell upon. To this point, we're only introduced to the hunter, but, I mean, we all know who this is, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Well, this creature has eaten several of his wrath, and the hunter was angry.
Yeah.
The hunter checked his blades, relics from his childhood that still maintain a razor's edge. A throaty growl stopped the basilisk, who waited for its next victim, but it also spurred the hunter into action in his magical Pewafwi. It allowed him to blend in with the rocks. The basilisk grew closer, or it grew impatient, waiting for the growl to come closer. It bent down to enter under the arch, and a globe of darkness enveloped its head, and it took a step back just as the hunter had planned. Fairy fire danced around the basilisk's head, blue and purple flames. The hunter pulled his hood down, for his eyes would only be a weakness to him in this fight, and he drew his scimitars as he dashed up the body toward the head of the creature. The basilisk spun back around, but before it made it halfway, the first scimitar had dived into one of its eyes. The creature reared and thrashed, trying to get at the hunter. Noxious fumes came from its maw. The hunter was a step ahead, and its second scimitar found the basilisk's other eye. Then the hunter unleashed fury. The basilisk was the intruder. It had killed his wrath. Blow after savage blow bashed into the monster's armored head, flecked off scales, and dived for the flesh beneath. The basilisk knew it was in danger, but it still believed it would win. It had always won. If only it could get its poisonous breath in line with the hunter. Suddenly the growl came again, and a large panther sprung toward it and latched onto the basilisk's maw. It drove its claws into the gums so the basilisk would drink of its own blood. The panther did not fear the poisonous breath because it was a magical creature impervious to such attacks. Behind the huge head, the hunter struck again and again, 100 times more. Savagely, viciously, the scimitar slammed through the scaly armor, through the flesh, and through the skull, battering the basilisk down into the blackness of death.
That has to be exhausting.
Yeah, you would think
on
that,
Drizzt's
like,
part,
just from the cardio standpoint, he'd be spent, right? I mean, for me, it's an amazing battle between a lone drow and his companion versus what is described as being basically the most dangerous of dangerous inhabitants of the Underdark. And not only does the hunter destroy this basilisk with a sense of ease, he does it with a sense of personal outrage. The basilisk had eaten his wrath, but more importantly, it had trespassed on his land, and it was the interloper, I think is what R.A. called it. And it's such a cool way of describing a monster, which, as far as the monster was concerned, was just walking around doing monster things, just minding its own monster business. And then Drizzt suddenly has to go implant himself in this monster's day-to-day activities.
Right. Yeah, I guess that is.
Monster
Yeah,
got up that morning, was like, I eat a couple of wrath, make my way down to the
Right.
supermarket, see Monster Charlie, maybe play a game of Monster Checkers, and, there's Drizzt, like, whoa there, monster, thou shalt not pass. And, the whole scuffle broke out all of a sudden.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You say like, oh, it's minding his own business. And it's like, well, yeah, but he went into the wrong territory. But it's like, yeah, like on a normal, that would be a normal day for him. No, totally.
Right. He's just out there doing his basilisk things. Like, do I look good in the mirror? Darn right I do. Looking fresh. Looking basilisk clean.
Awesome. No, that was a very awesome part of the book. And I don't know. In my third read through, just totally forgot to start at the prologue and started at chapter 1. So that is my bad. In the future, I'll make sure that there's not going to be another prologue.
Well, not until we get to book 3, ladies and gentlemen, but that
Which
is only
won't take that
5
long.
parts away.
Right. It's not going to take half a year.
Nope. We can guarantee that.
Awesome. Okay. So my dim light revolves around the plot involving matron Sinafe, now or then
foreshadowing.
Shanaina, or whatever her name was, Do'Urden. Right. So like the first time through, well, let me just get through this. So during the ruling council meeting in chapter 1, Malice is informed that Sinafe is to be one of Malice's daughters. Of course, this is a very weird situation, and Malice understandably hates the idea. But then Malice hears a voice in her head. Keep her as long as you need her. You will know when the time is right. And Salvatore goes on to hint toward the idea that this is the Mind Flayer. Like it crosses Malice's mind, right? Though there's no point where she actually pinpoints that it was exactly
right, because for all we know, this could just be some kind of psychotic break that she's having, and she's like, oh yes, I will get rid of her when I feel the need.
But this just brings me back to a previous discussion we had in the first book. The Mind Flayer, I feel like the Mind Flayer is definitely toying, running Menzo Baronzon, just toying around with it. I feel like since the Mind Flayer is sort of part of House Bayenray, the first house of Menzo Baronzon, there's a reason for that. It's because they have the Mind Flayer, and the Mind... I don't know. That's just what I'm thinking right now. But anyway...
So you're saying that you find yourself to be a conspiracy theorist on par with the point that the secret government of Menzo Baronzon has been infiltrated by Mind Flayers who are not letting themselves be known to the lower common drow that work the day-to-day forces inside of Menzo Baronzon. That there are these not reptilian but squid-like people who are running the entire...
Okay, so you make me sound like a crazy person when you phrase it that way.
That suddenly voices in our head are going to... Okay.
It's hard to not think that, right?
No, absolutely is, because you sit there and it's like... Does Matron Bayenray know that's happening? Did she give the order for it to happen? Or is he doing that while also having Matron Bayenray think that he works for her?
Right. So, anyway, that's not specifically my dim light, just a small, chunk of it. Mm-hmm. But then, moving on into Chapter 5, Malice starts to unveil her plan for getting back into Lolth's favor. Of course, the overarching plan is to sacrifice Drizzt, but how can she get him to come back, right? So Malice summons a Yochlal into the Great Chapel when everyone's there, everyone's present, and she knows that the Yochlal can read her mind. And when Malice requested Zincarla, the Yochlal was just angered so much as Malice wasn't even in the favor of Lolth, and Zincarla is one of Lolth's greatest gifts. And it's a rare gift to get, or I should say, it's a rare gift to ask for, and it's even rarer for the gift to be given. I think that's how R.A. Salvatore phrased it. So to ask for it when you're not even in Lolth's favor is just absurd.
Right.
And so Malice also had a crummy sacrifice for Zincarla, so it was just kind of really?
Right.
A drugged up male.
Right. Risen of all males too. Not even just a male. This wet rag of a guy.
Yeah, this pushover. This is no sacrifice, right? So when Malice presented that sacrifice, we, the reader, we're meant to see Risen all drugged up and assume that he's going to be the sacrifice. But after reading Malice's thoughts, the Yochlal says, "Oh, do continue," suddenly being very interested in what Malice was doing. And then Shanaina, as the quote first daughter, stands forward to drive the ceremonial dagger into Risen. Matron Malice stops her, saying This time I must do it. She starts the ceremony with a series of chants, raises the dagger up high, then comes down, suddenly driving her arm sideways and the dagger into the chest of Shanaina. What treachery! What deception! I was surprised when I first read this, and I was even more surprised the second time I listened to the audiobook, because my first time through, I didn't catch the foreshadowing from the Mind Flayer. I didn't catch the fact that the Mind Flayer was orchestrating all of this. At least that's what it is meant to sound like. And I just thought it was just such a great little arc in the first part of this book. Just such great writing.
What is the world coming to when you can't trust a matron mother of House Do'Urden in the middle of Menzo Barons? I mean, she's the 8th ruling council. If you can't trust her, oh boy.
Can you trust anybody?
No, I think it's a really good dim light. Because for me, you really do. You have to wonder about like Drow and the goddess of chaos and everything. Because it's like, it's like a hop, spit, and a jump ago that, the Mind Flayer allegedly is like, hey, you'll know when to get rid of her. Then Matron Bayenray, like, as soon as dawn cracks on the day, is like, oh, hold on, there's a sacrifice that needs my hand. Gonna finish this. No, you took it 90% of the way there. Let me get it. And then, bam, just switches targets right on this. It's first opportunity that she gets to double cross.
Right. But it's
Shanae.
Like going from...
She's like, you're dead.
Yeah, but between like chapter 1 to chapter 5, I totally forgot about that,
Yeah.
And so going back and like going through it again and hearing those voices, I'm like, oh, right, shoot.
Because when it first comes about, it seems like one of those things you want to let's put a pin in that and come back. Because clearly that's meant to. No, it's not. It's meant to fact that like as soon as she gets a breath back and slows down her heart rate, she's just going to assassinate the lady.
Yep. So cool. Awesome.
And the Yaklal goes from being like, bro, I don't even watch baseball. Why am I at a baseball game? What do you got me here for? To suddenly being like, oh no, this is my jam. Go ahead. Yeah. Swing away. Yeah. I actually love this sport. Go ahead. What are we doing? Sacrifices today?
Awesome. All right. So that's the dim light reel. Let's start to link some of these chapters to our favorite tabletop game in the portion of the show we call the Dungeon Delve.
Of course, you know that the Dungeon Delve is the part of the show where we link this week's reading with our favorite tabletop game. So, my Knid, your Knid, my Knids, right? Come on. When we came across these creatures in the beginning, I was automatically drawn to them. They're large, they're silent for the most part, they're stoic, and we're really only told about their losses and their unwillingness to deal with interlopers. They've lived next to Drizzt for years, but they don't work with him or mingle with him any more than is necessary. Mm-hmm. According to Forgotten Realms fandom wiki, they're a race of ambulatory fungus creatures known for their peacefulness and appreciation of quiet. Making their homes in the darker corners of the world, they resemble giant fungi, ranging from 2 to 12 feet tall, with their main distinguishing feature being their limbs. The upper half split into a pair of arms below the cap, and their lower half divided into a pair of legs at the stump. Each extremity is extremely pudgy and broad, with their hands ending in 2 stubby fingers and a thumb. The feet hosting like a numerous vestigial toes. These numbers are not universal. Some fungal folk host more than the usual number of limbs or digits. Their skin is bloated flesh that ranges in the colors of like purple to gray. And then 2 eyes rest on the caps, perfectly concealed against the rest of the skin when they're shut. So an interesting fact, some fungus excrete a poison that oozes from everywhere except their hands. There's also a mutant strain of myconid referred to as venom spores that have a pale milky skin tone contrasted by a bright red cap. Their eyes were a sickly shade of yellow with identically colored spots adorning their cap. So if you're a mushroom fanatic, that would be like your mascara mushrooms. The ones from like Mario with the red and the white circles on them.
So not the ones from The Last of Us, I guess?
No. Probably not quite so vicious looking. I see much more of a Nintendo build here. So, unlike any of the other creatures of the Underdark, myconids have a complete aversion to violent behavior. They have a general sense of distrust towards outsiders due to their experience with most of the other entities. They do make a note to say that they are a thoughtful race who will give shelter or allow passage through their colonies to those who approach with peaceful intentions. And this makes sense when you think about, why they'd allow Drizzt to live beside them for so long. He may have expressed violent behavior as the hunter, but his intentions were always to strive for peacefulness.
Right.
I also find it neat that when they mention the venomous spores, where Drizzt felt the spores come toward him from the new Mushroom King, he realized that
Right.
some of the spores could be dangerous, but not the ones that he saw. He knew that,
Yeah.
like on sight, those were okay.
Yeah. So, like, how many times did he experience the poisonous ones to learn that?
Oh, I mean, it's probably part of the academy, the academy learning. Almost called it the
Oh,
academy.
could be.
The
Could be.
academy.
The academy, yeah, of course.
Goodness. So their fungal folk were largely peaceful, but there is one variant that existed that was far more insidious. They were a heavily expansionist breed, seeking to grow quickly in both number and territory, but they are not known to be evil. Even the venom spores only sought combat when permitted, and they evidently are considered a bloodthirsty variety. So the mushroom folk do not. Go ahead.
That has to be the Last of Us.
Yes,
Mechanids.
those are more like those
yeah.
the rapidly expanding. And I
Right.
thought it was neat because fungus really does range from so many different forms that they literally broke it down: different spores, different
Did they
limbs,
really?
different looks.
That's cool.
And so for them, they don't handle weapons. They resort to like melee pummeling. The ones that excrete poison can use that to enhance their attacks, but spores were the main weapon. And it's not always a combat-driven approach for their spores. The effects, they varied widely, almost wildly. They varied widely. As they grow older, they gain access to a greater number of spores, and they have different types and uses. Distress spores were the first to develop, and this really kind of made me think of like the genealogy, it's the wrong word, of the mushroom folk, like how they genetically adapt to their surroundings.
Yeah.
Distress spores were the first to develop. They quickly spread hundreds of feet in a matter of seconds and alert the myconids of danger. So the first thing that they develop is the ability to tell each other to flee
Right.
because there's danger. Then after that, you get rapport spores that give them the ability to telepathically engage with other intelligent life forms. This is how Drizzt was talking to them.
Okay.
And then reproduction spores came next. Then came pacification spores, which would daze incoming threats. Now, this is where the venom spores, their pacification spores, actually contained a toxic alternative that was dangerous to non-myconoid forms.
Okay.
Then they get hallucination spores, which help actually with their melding rituals between themselves. But they also can kind of work or factor as a way to incapacitate other non-myconids. You think about it, you'd be too busy in the corner tripping, like, oh man, everything's going wacky, but you're still incapacitated. You're not going to be doing a whole lot of fighting.
Right.
And then finally, I guess like at end stage fungal man, you're going to come to animator spores, which could only be used by a sovereign, which is like, their main leader guy.
Okay.
This spore caused a bulbous fungus to grow on intact corpses and took control over their systems to make spore servants. This is also very much like the ones in The Last of Us, if you're thinking
Yes,
about
it is.
Now, the expansionist myconids could not use the telepathic contact. They'd only be able to convey raw emotions like fear or satisfaction, except for the sovereign, the large one. They're genetically a little different in the thanks... there's genetically a little difference in it, which in their fists, which are covered in spikes. They're also more magically versed. They have these things called rot priests. There's this strange link between positive and negative energy. Radiant power actually prevents their regeneration, but upon death, they burst and release healing energy. They're able to absorb the damage of others in their colony, inflict necrotic pain in others. These fungal folks are really fascinating. When I fell into this rabbit hole, I did not realize how deep it's going to go.
Yeah, I didn't realize there was that much.
No, I mean, and this is like all of this and much, much more is even with the fact that their true origins are practically unknown due to the fact that they have no actual verbal or written language. So they weren't keeping a history of themselves, so to speak.
Okay.
They live in large colonies, but they all possess unique personalities. We see that again with Drizzt being able to interact with the new Mushroom King.
Okay.
They have 6 stages of growth, which occur every 4 years or so. That's why I told you the different spores that come in, and their life ending somewhere after 24 years.
Oh,
I mean,
that's so short.
right? Look, guys, I could get lost forever, but we're gonna go ahead and put them in the creature feature with links for you to dive in even further. We're gonna strap this in and go through the stat block real quick, just so you have the D&D part of it. The average mic in it is considered unaligned, no chaos, no neutral, no alignment. It's just
Okay.
unaligned, and they're obviously a plant. They have a AC of 12. They have hit points averaging 38 hit points. Speed of 20 feet, so they're not the quickest. You wouldn't imagine a spore is going to run you down, or mushroom.
Yeah.
They get a +2 to strength. They also get a +1 to wisdom and con. Goodness.
Constitution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting everything kind of melded up there in my head. The words weren't coming out. It was like con dexterity? No. So we mentioned before they're immune to poison. They do have blind sight. They get 60 feet. Passive perception is a 10, so they don't have anything on my current druid that's running around.
Yeah.
But they're semi-intelligent. Their language is telepathic. They also put it down as Myconid, but again, they don't really have any like formal language as such.
Right.
They get a disadvantage on attack rolls with wisdom checks that rely on sight when in the sunlight because they have a sensitivity.
Oh, gotcha.
Spore clouds. They recharge on a 5 and a 6. They expel a cloud of poisonous spores in a 5-foot radius. Victim will take a DC 10 Constitution saving throw, and on a fail, takes 2d6 poison damage, half on a save. They also have dominating spores. Now, this is it's a little bit where the history and the mechanic doesn't quite match up because they're not venom spores. They're going to just use the venom spores. Now, the dominating spores, they also recharge on a 5 and a 6. They are a +5 to hit. And they make a DC, the target on a target gets a DC wisdom save or becomes dominated. This means that they have a telepathic link as long as you're on the same plane of existence. And they can use this link to issue commands while you're conscious to do things like attack that, run over there, or fetch. Each time you take damage, you'd make a wisdom save to see if you stay dominated. This sounds horrendous if they get you with that.
Yeah, like if you're on the same plane.
Yeah.
Like there's no running
for the
away
duration. They're on a higher level, they can dominate you for up to an hour. But this would stop you from being like, oh, he's dominated. Let's throw up a portal. I grab my friend. I jump through, and we're over in Icewind Dale. And it's like, no, you're still on the same astral plane. So therefore, that guy is still dominating your friend. You better find another workaround.
Yeah. Crazy.
So they go from being these creatures who, like, again, they abhor violence. They don't really fight and stuff like that. And wow, they could be very tricky.
I wonder if anyone has made up character sheets for these, as far as like if anyone wanted to be a Myconid, if anyone like homebrewed a level up system for them.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like what you have here. I mean, there's a few things here and there, but yeah, I wonder if anyone's done that. That'd be cool.
If you have, by all means, jump into our Discord. Give us an idea. Shoot us an email. Drop us a link. Let us know. It'd be really kind of cool to see some of the homebrew ideas that maybe go a little bit outside the box.
Yeah, totally. In fact, I have something else that you should totally join the Discord for, or send us an email if you have anything to add to it. But I had, for my Dungeon Delve, there was a moment in the book where it was just like something was said and I was just like, really? Huh. And it got me thinking about it, and I just could not have this not be my Dungeon Delve. So I wanted to talk about calendars within the D&D world, right? So, what's the situation? After the sacrifice of Sinnefe, the Yochalal informs Malice that she has 10 days to sacrifice Drizzt. And right after that, it says that is 70 cycles of Narbondale. Okay, that's where we're at. That's what she said. I had to read
10 days is like a week?
So that's what it seems like, right?
Well, because the cycle of Narbondale would be a day. 7 of those cycles would be a week times 10. They call 7 days a 10-day.
So here's my thought process. So a 10-day is a 10-day 10 days? And when I looked it up online, people were saying, yeah, a 10-day is 10 days. So then 70 cycles of Narbondale, how many days of that? You can only figure that 70 cycles is 70 days. It would make more sense if a 10-day was 7 days, just like you were saying. That would make a lot more sense.
Okay, because I'm sitting here in my head like, wait a minute. I mean, the math doesn't work for me.
No, it does not compute, right? And so I'm just like, what is going on here? When I looked online, now this was only a couple sources and it was just real quick. Maybe I needed to look a little more in depth. But I looked up a 10-day and it was like a 10-day, it's 10 days. And so I don't know. Like, I'm not a rocket scientist, but 10 days should be 100 days if a 10-day is 10 days. And 70 cycles of Narbondale would be 70 days. So
otherwise,
you'd
have
up,
7
right?
cycles of Narbondale in a day, and that doesn't even break down right.
Or something like that, yeah. Not quite 7 in a day, but something like that, where you're having multiple per day. So
well, yeah, I mean, if 70 is a 10-day and a 10-day is 10 days, that'd be 7 cycles per day in a 10-day. And it just doesn't make sense to have an odd amount of cycles on a stalactite that goes up and down.
Right. So, the way I led into this was maybe our listeners have an explanation for this, right? Join the Discord. Send us an email if you know what the explanation is.
Look, if you have a copy of a Drow calendar, make sure that you cover up Miss July. We don't need you sending any kind of Drow gifts like that. But by all means, send us a picture in the Discord and let us know what your Drow calendar looks like, Goodness.
Right. So, I mean, when I read this, it got me thinking about having a calendar in your D&D games. So that's really what I wanted to talk about. But that just kind of that's what caught my attention. So, excellent. Jeffrey, I know when we started playing our first campaign, like the one that we played in person, I don't know if you remember this, but I had it down to the date.
Oh, yeah, you had a little time turner, too, didn't you?
Oh, man, I had a time of day, like a little clock that I would turn as we were playing, and the date and the month and the year even, I think. Like, it was so much more in-depth. Like, like I had names for the months, I had seasons, I had festivals, I had everything. It was a really fun thing that I was able to just like, it was just another little creative outlet while I was preparing for the games. So that was nice in that way. It was just a fun little thing I could add to make it a little more interactive and livable. Of course, like I was saying, it's a lot of extra work too. But hey, if you are lazy like me, in like our most recent campaign, I don't even know what happened to that calendar, so it's gone. But if you're lazy like me, you can look up a number of examples online. So it seems like
you say lazy, but it's when people need to take a rest that the clock really starts to work against everybody, because it's like, we need 8 hours. Okay, but in order to do that, these guys need 6 hours, but these guys need 4 hours. And so like every time you take a sleep, it's like a 12-hour shift for everybody to get their 8 hours in. So the next thing you know, you're only getting 4 hours of adventuring a day that you keep changing your clock. It's tough, man.
So you can make up your own calendar, but yeah, you can find so many examples online. It seems like the calendar of Harptos, I think is how it's pronounced, is the most commonly used one in Faerun. But there's a bunch of possible calendars out there. I know there's a lot of images as well, so I'm gonna try like an image of what the calendar looks like, with like labeling all the months and everything. So I'm going to see if I can find something like that. Also put that in the, not in the creature feature. But
every month is another matron mother of that ruling houses.
Oh,
like,
man,
no.
That'd be cool.
Like, there's wrinkly old matron Bay and Ray. Right on January.
Okay.
Just scowling at that picture.
So my intentions, like initially, the first time we were playing, my intentions for incorporating a calendar it was actually like in hopes to provide a world that can actually be lived in, you know? One where you guys, where my players would be able to go on a little quest for, you know, a couple days. But then you come back and you have homes and you have families and you have jobs and you can live normal lives. And maybe like between sessions, it's like, hey, 4 months went by. Let's see how much money you guys made or something. Because, I mean, you would have a chance to go to festivals. You would have a chance to run your farm or to run an inn or whatever you have, right? I was really into that idea. So I really wanted to have that as an option.
You were going to create D&D games as one of those away from keyboard games that level up while you're not there?
Well, I was thinking about it. Just that,
you know, like, oh, your character's been doing great with husbandry. You now have 7 chickens.
You'd still have to roll for it. Like,
oh, okay. Right.
It wouldn't just be like...
You've been away for 3 real weeks. You've now made 3 cows, 2 chickens, and you've harvested the corn. Couldn't find anybody to take it to market, though. Your corn rotted on the corner, and everyone refers to you now as Farmer McStinky Corn.
So I did find that this calendar idea was quickly pushed to the side when I wanted to make the campaign into like an epic quest, you know? I mean, when you're on an epic quest, there's no downtime, right? Like, I mean, there's downtime in the fact that you need to rest at night, but it's not like, well, I'm going to go harvest my stinky corn. It's, you know, you have this...
Not harvesting it is how you get stinky corn.
Like, if you don't finish this quest, if you don't stay on this quest, the world is going to end. Like, that's the mentality that I had with the most recent couple campaigns.
Like Frodo's got to stop halfway through it because it's time to pick the crops. Like, seasonally speaking, Harvest Festival is here. I'm going to put this the ring on the side over here and go chop down some wheat.
To be fair, if you read Fellowship of the Ring, that's exactly what he does for years. He has the ring for years.
He was getting to it, you know what I mean? Like, just don't ask him how many times you've asked him to cut the yard. He's going to get out there and do it soon. He's been meaning to. His back hurts. He had a long day at work.
You know, that's a good example. That's an example of putting the epic quest on the back burner and just like living life and doing that instead.
What'd you do today? Man, I had 3 growlers of hot chocolate, okay? You leave me be.
So
about to watch the World Quidditch Cup over here.
So I do hope that eventually our current game can get to that point where we can, you know, like incorporate little quests and like, hey, how did your farm do? Or how's the inn doing? Or something like that. I think something like that would be a lot of fun, but how our current campaign is going, I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon.
Like, I've sacrificed all the villagers to try to gain the favor of the gods. You did what? They're all gone.
All right. Well, that's the Dungeon Delve, and I think that's going to do it for this episode. So I want to thank you for listening.
Oh, no.
And remember that if you like the show, give us a 5-star rating. Also, make sure you're getting the most out of this podcast. Pick up a copy of the book and read along with us. If you don't have time to read, you can get the audiobook just like I do and listen during your commute, at the work, at the gym, wherever you can. And when you've read the next part, shoot us an email at drizztdoneright@gmail.com. Let us know your favorite parts, or you can log on to the Discord to join in on the ongoing discussion. Remember, we would love to hear from you.
Well, we found our way to the end of the tunnel, and that's either a light or an oncoming locomotive. But what a smashing success this has been. See? Smash.
Nice.
As always, we want to thank you, our listeners, for being on the other end of this episode. We appreciate the time you give us, and we, if you'd like to give a little bit more, we do have that link to support this podcast. It is in the episode description, and it's a little kindness goes a long way. Hang on tight, folks. We're going to rip through this book pretty quick. Hope you're paying attention. Until the next time that you press play and we join you at the speakers, farewell, friends. Play fair and be well.